Troll. Oh, okay.
Good afternoon. I'm glad you could be with us today. I'm sorry I'm a little, don't have my jacket on. We're upstairs undergoing our site team visit at the moment as well. So we have the ABA here to go through our accreditation, which occurs every 7 years. But just wanted to say a word. Oh, we're on here too. Wonderful. Just wanted to say a word about Professor Josh Blackman. We were so fortunate a few years ago when we went to the hiring fair, or it's affectionately known as the meat market in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to maybe embarrass.
You always do.
I'm going to embarrass you a little bit again. But I know when we started the search process, you hear from thousands of people apply for every opening that a law school might have. And our team looked at Professor Blackman's resume to date, and we said, wow, do you think we could even get him to come for an interview? And so I said, you know, if we want the best, we have to make the offer. So we made the offer. He came for the interview. And after the interview, we're again impressed. And do you think he'd visit the campus? Well, you got to invite him. So he visited the campus, and we made him an offer. And we're so glad that he came here to our law school. He has been a prolific writer since he's been here. This is his second book. Unraveled is his second book. His first book was Unprecedented. And I understand you are working on a third book already. Undone. And so you can see the theme here developing. But I can honestly say, you told me if you gave me a copy, I had to start. I've started to read it. And once you do, I think you're going to finish reading it. Just the way he lays out the opening is very compelling. So also, you might not know, Professor Blackman was chosen at Forbes magazine, everyone's familiar with that, as one of their 30 under 30, which is amazing. I mean, think about all the people that they look at for that award, and they pick 30 people, and Professor Blackman is one of those. He writes constantly on constitutional issues. He's on every media outlet you can imagine. He's in demand on the speaking circuit, but he still manages to get his service into the school, and that is part of the service to the school, and keep working on his teaching. Not only is he a great writer, but he has told me he hopes it's not immodest for him to say he wants to be the best teacher in this school too. So we're very lucky to have him, and so without further ado, present to you Professor Josh Blackman, please.
Thank you. And he means this. He is really busy today. These accreditors have him running around everywhere. It's actually something. So I appreciate the dean could take even a minute out of his busy schedule. Everything he said is false. Nothing he said is true. So I'm very grateful to be back here talking about my second book. In 2013, I was at this very same podium talking about my first book, Unprecedented, a Constitutional Challenge to Obamacare. And today you're in for a treat. My second book is called Unraveled, Obamacare, Religious Liberty, and Executive Power. And in the next hour or so, I would like to walk you through the history of the Affordable Care Act and how we got to where we are today. So indeed, the story of Obamacare begins before Obamacare was even a thing. It begins back in 1993, when President Clinton and First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton attempted to nationalize our healthcare system in a certain way with something called the Health Security Act. This would have given every American a little card that says that you have the right to healthcare. This plan, affectionately dubbed Hillary Care, would have radically changed the way Americans get access to health insurance. Now, when this bill was first proposed, people were kind of on the fence. Do I like it? Do I don't like it? They don't really know. The reason why, and this may surprise you, is that before Obamacare, by and large, people were happy with their health insurance. Every year after year, people were polled, do you like your health insurance? Roughly 80 to 85% of Americans say, yeah, we're happy with our insurance. Because for the most part, people aren't sick. When you're not sick, health insurance doesn't really mean much to you. So the leading enemy of Hillary Care were Harry and Louise. Do anyone remember these commercials? Most of my students are probably too young because they weren't alive to actually remember these. But these were a series of commercials aired in 1993 and 94. And the setup was this. A ma and pa sitting around a table at home, looking over this voluminous healthcare plan and saying, you know, I don't want the government getting between me and my doctor. I like my doctor. I like my insurance. I want to keep my insurance, and I don't care what the government says about it. Why is this so significant? Because this is what killed Hillary Care. After these commercials, there's no internet, there's only TV. After these commercials ran wall to wall for nearly a year, the popularity of Hillary Care spiraled downward. And what happened? The plan went nowhere. Many people credit these commercials not only defeating Hillary Care, but also giving the Republicans the House in 1994 midterm elections. But these commercials also taught a very important lesson. If you want to reform health insurance, people have to feel comfortable that they can keep the insurance they like, or at least that's what you tell them. So you see, there are three aspects of health insurance that are unescapable: cost, comprehensiveness, and accessibility. I'll give you two, but you can't have all three. If you want cheap insurance, it's not going to be very good. If you want comprehensive insurance, it's going to be expensive. And if you want insurance that's available to everyone, it's not going to be very good and it will not be cheap. So pick two out of these three. You cannot have all three. So what does this mean? The Affordable Care Act was designed to expand insurance to nearly 30 million new people. When you expand the accessibility of health insurance, cost goes up, coverage goes down. Basic economics, my friends. But how was the ACA sold? In a very deliberate fashion to avoid these fundamental economics, with a simple promise that was repeated by the president nearly 36 times. You've all heard it. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Now, this wasn't just a lie. Politicians lie all the time, right? I don't care that politicians lie. The reason why this statement was so pernicious is it created a false sense of entitlement. The idea that we can give insurance to 30 million new people, but not screw up for anyone else. That we can bring all these new people into an insurance marketplace and in no way impact what everyone else pays. This was sophistry. You cannot do both. If you want to make insurance more available, it's going to make it more expensive for people who have it and less comprehensive for those who like their plans. Inescapable aspect of logic. But with this lie, which was repeated nearly 36 times, the American people were misled, deceived even, about how this law would work. And it was only on this basis, and trust me, if this promise was not made, it would have been Hillary Care Part 2. It barely passed by the skin of its teeth. Had this promise not been made, I would have written 2 fewer books, so we would have no Obamacare. I might not have a job for all I know. I've made my career off this law. But indeed, we probably would not have had the Affordable Care Act. But the lie was told, and in 2009, Congress considered this bill. You may recall that in the midterm elections, then the 2000 elections, the Democrats swept. They won the presidency. Eventually, after a disputed election in Minnesota, they got their 60th vote, and with that, they could defeat any filibuster. Republicans had no interest in backing this health care reform. They wanted nothing to do with it. So the president and leading Democrats made a decision saying, you know what? This is so important. We are going to pass this on a straight party line vote. We do not need a single Republican to pass this law. Okay. Now, there's a consequence to doing this. Certainly, you can pass a bill in a straight party line vote, right? You got the votes, pass it, wonderful, mazel tov, right? But the problem is what happens after. When nearly half the country has no buy-in for this law, it makes it very difficult to actually negotiate anything further because half the country wants the law to disappear. But this calculus was made that we simply pass the law now, everyone else will fall in line later. Not a chance. So indeed, on December 24th, 2009, the Senate voted on this bill known as the Affordable Care Act. At nearly 3,000 pages, no one read the bill. No one read the bill. Trust me on this one. The senator who chaired the Finance Committee, Max Baucus of Montana, said, I don't read bills. I pay people to do that. So all of you 1Ls who are in legal writing now, you will one day be paid to read a bill for a member of government. That will be your job one day. Or maybe you'll be in government, you can skip reading altogether. So as you wish. But this bill was passed. Now, what's critical about this bill passed in December 2009 was it was a draft. What do you mean it was a draft? This was never meant to be the final version of the bill. The idea was, let's pass this bill now. Let's have the Senate vote on it. Then the House will pass their version of the bill, and then we'll have a conference. We'll go between and iron out the kinks and figure out this we like and that we don't. So they passed this bill December 24th, 2009. It was never meant to be the final version of the bill. But I have a surprise for you folks. If you ever want to discuss legislative intent, this became the final version of the bill. Why? That summer of 2009, Senator Ted Kennedy had passed away. He was a Democrat from Massachusetts. He was the 60th vote in the Senate. Senator Kennedy was replaced by Scott Brown, a Republican who ran on a Tea Party platform of stopping Obamacare. This is stunning for a lot of reasons because generally Republicans don't win in Massachusetts. But the reason why this is so significant is that he was the 60th vote to stop Obamacare. And with that, the Senate could no longer take another vote on Obamacare. So that draft bill they passed on December 24, 2009, that was never meant to be final, that became the only bill they could vote on. Yes, all these lawsuits saying, what did Congress intend? What did they mean? They didn't mean a damn thing. This was never meant to be the actual final law, yet we're stuck with it because of politics. Indeed, Speaker Pelosi made the decision that, well, we don't like certain things of this bill. You know, that there are state exchanges and federal exchanges. They only wanted a federal exchange. They didn't like the way subsidies were being paid. All these things that are screwing up now about Obamacare that maybe could have been tweaked never happened because of the mentality, let's pass this thing now, worry about it later. And my friends, we are worrying about it later. So the House decided to vote on the Senate bill on a straight party line vote of 219 to 210. If I do this quickly enough, I can make a zero there. Not a single Republican supported the Affordable Care Act. And indeed, 34 Democrats crossed the aisle. A lot of those were allowed to cross because they were in vulnerable districts. But there was sufficient support to pass it. The president signs it the next day. You can see him all cheerful. If you look carefully, they have 23 pens here. And what he does is he signs a different part of his signature with each pen and hands these pens out as mementos. So he's thinking, yay, Obamacare. You know, I passed this. I did what no other president can do. I just cemented my legacy. Not so fast. Within 7 minutes, that's all it took, of the president signing the ACA into law, lawsuits were filed across the country challenging the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. What was the objection? Can Congress mandate that individuals buy health insurance? Can Congress require people to buy health insurance? As I discuss in my first book, Unprecedented, the Constitutional Challenge to Obamacare, can the government make you buy health insurance? Can they make you buy broccoli, which I no longer eat because of this case? No, they can't make you buy broccoli. They can't make you buy health insurance, but they can tax you for going without it. Huh? They can't make you buy health insurance, but if you're uninsured, they can tax you. What's the difference to the average person? Absolutely nothing. But to this guy, John Roberts, it apparently made a difference, enough to uphold the constitutionality of the law. So where does this leave us? In June 2012, the ACA was largely upheld. It turned back to the political sphere. Mitt Romney, the governor of Massachusetts, was running for the Republican platform. Feels like a lifetime ago. I know, right? You can't remember this happening. Lord help us all. So Mitt Romney was running for election, and he ran the platform of repealing and replacing Obamacare, which is coincidentally still the slogan of the GOP 5 years later. And it was utterly ineffective. Why? Because Mitt Romney created Obamacare. As governor of Massachusetts, he implemented in the state a law that looks really similar to Obamacare. It has a mandate. It has subsidies. It requires people to get insurance. It requires employers to provide insurance, right? So he was utterly and completely ineffectual at going up against the most divisive issue of 2012. Indeed, during the debate, President Obama called Governor Romney the godfather of Obamacare, if you can imagine. And with this, President Obama won a second term. Now, I would love to know what he and the chief were saying here. But when President Obama was sworn in for the 2013, I was thinking, oh man, you know what? This Obamacare thing, this is more or less done, right? Might be some little bit problems here, a little bit problems here. But, you know, I can go move on, write about something more interesting. I don't know, whatever else I'd write about, broccoli mandates, as it were. How wrong was I? In the period since 2013 began, the AEC has still been front and center. To this day, actually, fittingly, today's November 1st. Today is the beginning of the 4th open enrollment period, so that my timing is impeccable. Thank you to Dean Guder for letting me do it this day. But the remainder of my talk will focus on what happened since 2013, and there has been a lot. The first branch of case law I'd like to talk about concerns religious liberty, or as I called, conscience and contraception. During the debates over the ACA, the most thorny issue related to the funding of abortion. And a number of pro-life Democrats, led by Bart Stupak from Michigan, concerned that the ACA would provide new sources of funding for abortion. President Obama, frankly, needed this pro-life Democrat caucus for support because without it, he could not clear the threshold in the House of Representatives. So what did President Obama do? He signed an executive order saying that this law, the ACA, will not change any long-standing prohibitions against funding abortion. Now, I see a few of my former students in the room. As you know, an executive order is utterly worthless because it can be repealed on a moment's notice. And even more so, this order was really worthless because it didn't actually say anything useful. It basically, said smoke and mirrors. There was nothing there. Yet, this executive order was enough to to persuade the pro-life members of Congress to sign on board. And with this, the ACA secured the 219 votes in the House to pass. But there was another religious controversy that was almost entirely glossed over. It was introduced by Senator Mikulski of Maryland, and it was called the Women's Health Amendment. Now, I'm going to blow your minds right now. You've all heard about Hobby Lobby. You've heard about the Little Sisters of the Poor. You've heard about these cases involving a contraception mandate. Get ready for this, guys, right? The ACA does not have a contraception mandate. What do you mean? The actual bill Congress voted on, yes, they indeed voted on this bill. There was language, right? This was not some sort of miasma in the sky. The actual bill they voted on did not have a contraceptive mandate. The word birth control and contraceptives appears nowhere in the ACA. So why are Hobby Lobby and Little Sisters going to court? Because of this. Senator Mikulski's Women's Health Amendment says, and I'll read it, it's very simple. With respect to women, employers must pay for, quote, additional preventive care and screenings. That's all the statute says. That's all it says. For women, employers must pay for, quote, preventive care and screenings. Now, if I had asked anyone in this room, if you asked me, what do you think that means? Mammograms, cancer screenings, different diagnostics to check preventive care? Right. I think that would probably be a reasonable construction of the statute. However, the Obama administration took this language as a blank check, as Senator Mikulski knew they would. There was no mysteries going on here. The Department of Health and Human Services, in conjunction with the Health Resources Service Administration, in partnership with the Institute of Medicine, there's all these groups of these alphabet soup agencies, determined that the word preventive care actually means the full range of FDA-approved birth control. All of them. Everything from the, he wants a diagram, everything from the morning after pill, to the condom, to spermicide, everything else. I suppose preventive means preventing fertilization. I suppose that's how they interpreted preventive care, which is not the most obvious definition. So the consequence, though, of creating this is now employers must provide their workers with access to birth control. This was an actual commercial put out by a government agency in Colorado. I'm not kidding. And I'll read it for you if the letter's too small. Let's get physical. OMG, that's oh my God for the CLE credit. OMG, he's hot. Here's my favorite one. Let's hope he's as easy to get as his birth control. Oh, in other words, free. The consequence, though, of giving these women access to no-cost contraceptives is that someone's got to pay for it. the employer. Now, for the overwhelming majority of employers, no big deal. Most employers already cover birth control. It's not even an issue. Except when your employer is a bunch of nuns. The little sisters of the poor. As you can imagine, they were not so keen on paying for their employees' morning after pills. That was not on their list of catechisms, right? That's not what they were so keen on doing. As the ACA's contraceptive mandate was originally interpreted, the nuns would have had to pay for this birth control. If you were a church, this is actually crazy. If you were a church that operated a soup kitchen open to the public, that is, you did not check baptismal certificates at the door, you were considered not religious enough to be exempted from this law. This was the original accommodation, that only houses of worship that cater primarily to their own members. If you open your door to the public, welcome in strangers, too bad you're not religious enough. This was the Obama administration's view of religious liberty, and they thought this was actually a good idea. Want to talk about diversity? We need some diversity of thought. Maybe have this. But for what it's worth, Biden was pushing against this really hard. He was actually a Catholic, and he was outvoted. Controversy ensued. Cardinal Dolan basically gave Obama the Riot Act, and they tried round two. So under round two, all houses of worship were exempt. However, if you're a religious charity, you're not exempt. You are merely accommodated. What does it mean to be accommodated? The nuns don't have to pay for the birth control. The insurance company will pay for the birth control. However, the birth control will be provided through the nun's insurance plan, right? This way, the woman doesn't need to have a separate card. But the insurance policy of the nuns is actually amended, right? These are contracts. You guys are law students. They would actually amend the nun's contract to include the provision of contraceptives. This, they said, made them complicit in sin because they are now sanctioning and condoning the provision of products they disagree with. The nuns said, look, if this is so important, let the government give these women the policies directly, right? Let them go on Obamacare and get into a contraceptive-only policy. Let someone else pay for it. Don't hijack, they said, don't hijack our policies. And this would become the basis of a future legal challenge to the ACA. But the first manifestation of this was actually a for-profit corporation, not the nuns. Hobby Lobby, the craft store. Okay. But let's take a break from the courts for a minute, and let's talk about politics. Because it's impossible to unravel, no pun intended, the Affordable Care Act and politics because it was born in such a political storm. If you had asked me in 2012 after the election, Josh, will the effort to try and stop Obamacare end? I would have said, yeah, it's probably over, right? Move on to other things. You know, ISIS, we didn't even know about that then. You know, whatever was going on in 2012, we'll deal with that other stuff. How wrong was I? Which is why you should not believe any of my predictions. I'm always wrong. During the summer of 2013, our junior senator, Senator Ted Cruz, took to the airwaves and urged Congress to defund Obamacare. Cruz barnstormed the country in city after city, often with Senator Mike Lee of Utah, urging Congress to defund Obamacare. How would this work? This is a cosmic coincidence. Congress funds budgets for specific periods of time. The funding for the government ended on September 30th, 2013. September 30th. The Obamacare exchanges opened up on October 1st, 2013. So you have funding ends September 30th. Obamacare opens October 1st. Genius, the idea is. If we defund Obamacare, it cannot open for business on October 1st. This was a plan that Cruz and Lee hatched. Now, they're not idiots. They're both Supreme Court clerks. They're very smart. But the plan as stated could not possibly work. Why? Obamacare is much like Keith Richards and cockroaches. It cannot be killed. You see, the funding for the ACA is what's called a permanent appropriation. It doesn't require a new annual appropriation to keep it afloat. Even if you defunded the entire federal government, Obamacare would stay open. Why? Same reason why you get your mail during a government shutdown, or why you get your Social Security checks during a shutdown. The idea of a shutdown is a misnomer. Most things stay open. You can't get rid of them because they're permanent appropriations. That's the Keith Richards metaphor, right? In any event, Cruz decided that he would take the case to the American people. In a 24-hour filibuster of Obamacare, in which he actually managed to read, this is Dr. Seuss' Cat in the Hat, he actually managed to read the Cat in the Hat to his kids, the bedtime story, as they're watching him on C-SPAN, what every kid wants to do at 9 o'clock at night. This is actually Cruz after the 23rd hour. See his ties falling down. And if you zoom in right there, he's wearing a Gonzales, Texas, come and take it pin. So it was a very apt metaphor for our junior senator. But I need to stress, though, it wasn't actually a filibuster. People call it that, but that's not what it was. The reason why is that a vote was scheduled for the next day at noon. Nothing Cruz could do could postpone that vote. So it wasn't actually a filibuster. Filibuster means you talk till you can't stand. He could have kept going. He actually had a press conference immediately afterwards. His fortitude is remarkable. I mean, I'll be for 20 minutes. I'm already tired. He went for 23 hours, which is frankly stunning. But it didn't work. Or maybe it did work. I'm not sure. After Cruz's filibuster, the House of Representatives began galvanizing, we will not fund Obamacare. And the House refused to include a budget that funded Obamacare. The Senate, which was controlled by Democrats, said, okay, good for you guys. And September 30th came, midnight, and the federal government shut down. The most clear manifestation of the shutdown were the national parks. Now, if I ever had my druthers, the quickest way of improving our budget situation is say, during a government shutdown, keep the parks open. This is the only thing that most people notice about government shutdown. Why? Because you go to Washington, D.C., you want to visit the national memorials, right? You want to visit Washington and Lincoln and Jefferson before they tear them down, right? You want to visit these things, but you can't. You want to visit the Grand Canyon, big hole in the ground. It's shut down. You want to go see Mount Rushmore. Now, this is the craziest one. The park police actually closed, there's a road that went near Mount Rushmore. They actually closed off this little lookover to even park and see the monument. They closed that also. They closed Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. This is political theater. This is the president rubbing your face saying, look, we can't keep these monuments open. You can't go see your parks. Although, curiously, in New York, Governor Cuomo managed to use state funds to keep the Statue of Liberty open in Ellis Island. A same accommodation was not made to Governor Brewer in Arizona for the Grand Canyon, but make of that what you will. But they tried shutting down the monument, especially this is the World War II memorial, and a number of veterans were actually coming to D.C. that day to see. They're World War II vets. They want to see the memorial. Do you think these barricades stopped them? Not a chance. If the shores of Normandy could not stop them, neither could these stupid gates. So what they did was they literally picked these gates up, and they walked them across to the White House and dropped them in the White House lawn. Thanks, Obama. Yeah, so basically a serious rebuke of this. And there were these massive protests at the World War II memorials. But alas, all good things must come to an end, I suppose, and the government shutdown came to a crashing halt. Because not only were we dealing with a government shutdown, we were also dealing with the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is the amount of money Congress can borrow. And if that number is not raised, and it's raised every year, basically the government can't borrow any more money, which means we have to start defaulting on various obligations. Ultimately, the Republicans caved entirely. Not only did they fully fund the government and fully fund Obamacare, they actually eliminated the sequestration, which was a procedure put in place to cut spending. So the government shutdown, top to bottom, was an epic failure in all respects. It accomplished nothing except for giving President Obama a few victories. But even worse than giving the president some victories, it covered what was indeed the unraveling of Obamacare. Because on the same day, this cosmic coincidence, right? The same day that that the government shut down, Obamacare opened for business. Healthcare.gov launched, or at least was supposed to. You see, the government spent nearly $2 billion, billion with a B, $2 billion on a website that did not work. For weeks at a time, people weren't able to sign up and log on to this website. It was constantly down, and all these people were like, what the heck is this? I can't sign up for insurance. People waiting till they're blue in the face. This posed an existential crisis to the Obama administration, right? Could this website be fixed, or would it need to be scrapped in its entirety? They made the decision that it could be repaired, and the president called in the nerds, right? This was indeed the tech surge. Now, you know you're in trouble when your strategy for your website is also named after strategy for your rock, right? So this tech surge would find a way to magically restore the present prompt. that by Thanksgiving 2013, the Obamacare website would work. And to their credit, and this was one of the saving graces of the president's first couple of years, it worked. The nerds were able to fix the website. In less than a month, a team of like 5 guys from Facebook and Google did what an entire federal bureaucracy couldn't do in 2 years for $2 billion. It's stunning when you actually think about the incompetence of the people who now want to manage your health. They couldn't build a website. How could they do everything else? But we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But on top of the government shutdown, and on top of this website debacle, there was yet another crisis that was brewing, which was the cancellation of policies. You see, contrary to the president's promise that you can keep the policies that you like, Obamacare works very differently. The regulations the government issued said, if your policy does not meet these very strict guidelines, canceled, gone. There was no mystery that millions of people would lose their policies, yet the president kept lying about it because it was politically salient. So what happened? In the fall of 2013, letters went out from insurance companies, and between 2 and 4 million Americans got these cancellation notices. The exact number is actually fairly hard to pin down because the Obama administration won't release the numbers, but it's between 2 and 4 million. You can take your estimate wherever you want, but it's a significant number of people they like. No amount of oversight can ever cure that. Indeed, President Obama's promise that if you like your plan, keep your plan, was dubbed by PolitiFact the lie of the year. That's a pretty high honor for politicians who lie a lot. But this is a very big deal. For Joe Biden, a big effing deal, as Joe Biden once said. So now, with all these millions of people losing their policies, they had to get insurance somewhere, so they enrolled at their local Obamacare store. I don't know where this store is. I've been trying to find it. I can't. 1733. I don't know what the address is. But apparently there's some Obamacare store somewhere you can walk in. It doesn't quite work that way. But over the winter of 2013 and the spring of 2014, the Obama administration celebrated that 8 million people signed up. Now, this sounds like a lot, but you have to actually look at these numbers carefully. First of all, about 4 million people had their policies canceled. So a lot of the people who signed up already had insurance they liked and lost it. The second major thing to think of is that this is the number of people who, quote, signed up, not the, quote, people who paid. You see, a lot of people sign up for Obamacare, use health insurance, and then never pay their bills. Good luck collecting. Because insurance cannot deny coverage to anyone. And what they found is people who are very sick sign up, get treatment, get surgery, and then they cancel their policy and never pay. That is one of the reasons why premiums are going through the roof. Because we're having to pay for all these people is simply taking advantage of the system. But they're not taking advantage of the system. When you give people the option of buying insurance with no penalty and you can cancel it at any time, they're going to take advantage of it, right? That's how human nature works. They're being rational, unlike the people who designed this law. So let's pivot back to the cases. And I want to talk about religious liberty first. And there was a very significant decision from 1991 called Employment Division v. Smith. This case involved a Native American who used peyote as part of his religious ritual. For those of you who don't know what this is, and no one raised their hands, this is this hallucinogenic cactus that a lot of Native tribes use in their religious rituals. It's a controlled substance. That is, it is illegal to possess. Mr. Smith worked as, of all things, a drug counselor. He lost his job, not too surprisingly. He tried to apply for unemployment benefits with the state. The state denied benefits, saying, look, dude, you were fired for being a drug addict and a drug counselor. No good, right? So he lost his job, and then he could not collect unemployment benefits. He challenged the constitutionality of this decision, saying, look, this is burdening my religious exercise. Like, I want to use peyote. I should be able to get these benefits. Appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. In a decision that was very controversial by Justice Scalia, the court ruled against Mr. Smith. And they said, look, this is a law that applies to everyone equally. No one can do drugs. They're not targeting Native Americans. They're not targeting Jews or Baptists. It applies to everyone. Therefore, it does not violate the First Amendment. Okay, very unpopular decision. So unpopular that Congress passed a bill in record time, almost unanimously. If you can believe it, that's Orrin Hatch, Al Gore, and Chuck Schumer, right? They all agree on this bill called RFRA. the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And this bill, as its name suggests, attempted to restore the First Amendment from how it existed before the Smith case. And it said that if the government wants to burden religion substantially, they have to have a really compelling governmental interest. And oh, by the way, they must choose the least restrictive means, which means if they can burden religion one way and do it a different way with less of a burden, they have to choose the least restrictive means of going about it. Okay? Now, Supreme Court said, wait a minute, you can't do this. You can't tell us what the First Amendment means. And the Supreme Court struck down RFRA in a case called Bernie v. Flores, but only applied to the states. Congress cannot dictate to the Supreme Court how to interpret the 14th Amendment. But Congress can decide how the federal government behaves. So RFRA remains effective against the federal government. And it was on this basis that Hobby Lobby brought their challenge. Hobby Lobby is a picture frame company. It was started in the garage of a guy named David Green. He started with one store, and now they have locations across the country, and you can see a bunch of them. By the way, if anyone ever needs something framed, go to the one in Katy Freeway, right by I-10. It's very, very good. And I'll give you a funny anecdote. For my first book, I mailed copies of my book to all 9 justices. And I got none of them wrote me reply letters back, including Justice Sotomayor. And I have her letter framed at Hobby Lobby. So this is my little way of saying, guess what? Another funny anecdote, but I actually mailed copies of my second book to all the justices. I got letters back from Ginsburg, from Kagan, from Alito. I got a package back from Justice Sotomayor. She returned my book. She mailed it back. She said, I will not accept any, actually it was her secretary. The secretary said she will not accept any correspondences that may affect pending cases. Okay, so I got the book back. I wasted the postage. Maybe she'll buy a copy. I think she should. But if you come to my office, I'll show you the letters. I have some time. But in any event, Hobby Lobby's locations throughout the country. It was founded by David and Barbara Green. Now, what's unique about this company, even though they're nationwide, they have stores in all states, is that they're not publicly traded. Not publicly traded. Indeed, the company is very closely held. This might look like an Easter card, but it's indeed a photograph of the board of directors. You see, everyone who owns the company as a trust is of the same family. They're all the same religion. They have the ssame beliefs. And they all agree that 4 forms of birth control are sinful. Specifically the IUDs, the intrauterine devices, and certain kinds of emergency contraceptives, Plan B, and a drug called Ella. Now, why is this relevant? If you're a big publicly traded company, good luck not giving your female employees birth control. Good luck with that, right? Because people get angry. It's a publicly traded company. People will drop your stock. But if you're a privately held company and all the members of your board basically have the same religious beliefs, there is an agreement of what should and should not be provided. Why is it significant? Because the board decided we will not cover these forms of birth control, which gave rise to Hobby Lobby's challenge to the contraceptive mandate. And this case was appealed all the way up to the US Supreme Court. Now, to discuss Supreme Court cases, one of my favorite pastimes is looking at signs. The signs are always very good indications of what people think about the case. This one's my favorite. I'll read it if you can't see it. It says, if men could get pregnant, birth control would be from gumball machines and be bacon flavored. In the back, this one's also my second favorite. My mom's not ready to be a grandma. As you wish. This one. This is not a church, it's a craft store. This is not a healthcare plan. Ooh, this is my favorite too. She's dressed up like a pack of birth control pills. You can't tell what that is. No laughs. Okay, you should get the laugh. Okay. No bosses in my bedroom. I think this sign is actually somewhat misguided because Hobby Lobby would agree. They don't want to be in your bedroom. They don't want the fun what's going on in your bedroom. That's all you. But this sign seems somewhat off. Contraceptive is my business, not my boss's business. The hashtag is not my boss's, too many S's, right? You can't pluralize or do possessive in a hashtag. It doesn't quite work. Corporations are not people, my friends. This one you hopefully get a laugh from. Anyone know what this thing is? No cheating. What is it? A crocheted uterus, yes. Thank you. My God, yes, it's exactly what it is. It's a crocheted uterus. They bought the fabric at Joann's, I'm sure. So it says, Hobby Lobby, this uterus is for you. Indeed, there was actually a campaign to mail crocheted uteruses to Hobby Lobby's headquarters in Oklahoma City, saying, you can mess with this uterus, not mine. Okay. Keep your hobbies off my ovaries, and I'm with her. The pro-life signs are never quite as creative. I am pro-life, team life, pro-life generation, everyone's religious freedom. But these guys were on their game. It was about 30 degrees in DC that day. It was snowing. It was really, really bitter. And these guys are in there with kilts and bagpipes. This guy's wearing pants, but the other guys weren't. And they look pretty damn cold. And it says, God's law comes first, repeal socialist Obamacare. Not too much attention on those guys, but they always come back to the court. The case was argued by Paul Clement for Hobby Lobby and by Solicitor General Verrilli for the government. And in something of a surprise, the Supreme Court, by a 5-4 margin, ruled for Hobby Lobby. And they said, just because you're a corporation does not mean you lack First Amendment protections. Guess what, guys? If any of you belong to a church or synagogue, it's a corporation. They're all corporations. People associated with the corporate form does not mean they're without rights. Justice Alito said, to make someone buy something they deem sinful is itself a violation of their religious freedom. But more to the point, Justice Alito said, if the government can find a better way of giving these women birth control, do that. Put it on the healthcare exchange. Let someone else pay for it. Don't make Hobby Lobby pay for it, and let them get the same coverage. The lead dissent was authored by the notorious Ruth Bader Ginsburg, with RBG, as she is now fond of calling herself everywhere she goes. It's a little bit to her head, I think. I think RBG actually jumped the shark in this interview with Katie Couric. I think this is actually the moment where she lost it. But she's still in the court and sending me very nice thank you notes, so I'll be respectful. But anyway, Justice Ginsburg said this is a very bad idea. Corporations have no rights. And once we start giving exemptions to corporations, they're going to seek to be exempted from a whole host of laws, right? If a corporation doesn't want to hire a woman who's married, married woman should be at the home, chained to the kitchen, right? She had all this parade of horribles, none of which have actually come true, as it were. It seems this is a very localized thing to contraceptive purchases, but her dissent was there. The pro-life people celebrated. This girl blowing kisses sent a totally wrong message, but I guess she was very excited about it. So this was a conclusion of the first case, Hobby Lobby. The second case concerns something much more mundane, but more important, which were tax subsidies. The Affordable Care Act sets up two types of exchanges on which people can buy insurance. There's the federal healthcare.gov, and then there's state exchanges. Now, as you all know, states cannot be forced or commandeered to do stuff. Right? Congress can't tell state, you are required to make an exchange. That would be unconstitutional. But they can say, hey, Texas, if you don't want to build an Obamacare exchange, your residents can use our exchange as a backup, which is exactly what happened. Texas wanted nothing to do with Obamacare. So if any of you actually need to get insurance in the state, you will likely log on to healthcare.gov, not some sort of Texas-specific site. So far, so good, right? But then we actually get to the text of the statute. This is section 36B of the ACA, and I realize it's very small, so I'll read it for you. It says that you are eligible for subsidies, right? Your policy will be subsidized. You get these tax credits, make it a lot cheaper. If you enroll in an exchange established by the state. You get the subsidies if you enroll in an exchange established by the state. Now, one may think that means you get the subsidies if you enroll in an exchange established by the state. But what would the consequences be of that reading? In nearly 30 states on the federal exchange, people will get no subsidies. And oh, by the way, if you get no subsidies, Obamacare is entirely unaffordable. Obamacare has made insurance so expensive that if you don't qualify for a subsidy, you get nothing. By the way, who gets subsidies? People at 400% of the poverty line. What does that mean? If you're a family of four making more than $90,000 a year, you get no subsidies. Good luck affording insurance like that. I'll get there back in a minute. But for the people below this 400% level, they would only get subsidies in the event that the state established an exchange. This could be the rule. So the Obama administration said, no, what we're going to do,
we're going to treat state and federal exchanges equally. Notwithstanding this language, we will treat state and federal exchanges equally. Why? Because if we don't, Obamacare will fall apart. It would unravel to treat states and federal exchanges differently. A group of plaintiffs challenged the legality of this. This is Jacqueline Halbeig was one of the plaintiffs. And this is actually Doug Hurst with his wife Pam Hurst. And they challenged the legality of this payment. They said, wait a minute, you can't spend this money. The law says only for a state exchange. Went to the Supreme Court yet another time. This time the signs were not nearly as interesting. Tea Party patriots, I didn't like the IRS, don't take my care. But one sign that they did have a lot of salience and resonance was this one. Had the Supreme Court ruled that subsidies were unavailable in the federal and exchanges, people have lost their insurance. Obamacare will become utterly unaffordable. And for example, in Arizona, 266,000, in Alabama, 165. That's actually a Texas sign. I think it was nearly 1 million people in Texas who have lost their coverage if this happened. But the flip side is, if there were no subsidies, there's no individual mandate, and you can't be required to buy insurance you can't afford. So this case could have blown up Obamacare in like 36 states and really nationwide. What did the Supreme Court do? Well, John Roberts has made an annual tradition of breaking my heart, and this year broke my heart a different way. John Roberts said, well, you know, the text of the statute is strong, right? Yeah, established by the state. Yeah, that seems to have some meaning. But we have to look further. We have to look at the context of the entire act. And the chief said, the purpose of the ACA is to improve health insurance. We will not read this law in a way that hurts it. Wow. Once you take as your starting point that the ACA is only about improving access to health insurance, the game's over. The government wins in every case. The ACA, as I said at the outset, did not have a single intent. There were a lot of people trying to do a lot of different things, and there was this draft stupid bill that was never to be final. It's inconceivable to say the ACA had a single intent. I'll give you another intent involving the states. Letting the states have an incentive to build their own exchanges to prevent the single nationwide exchange from taking hold. That was in there also. But the chief's opinion simply looked past that. Justice Scalia dissented in what would be his final dissent read from the bench. And Justice Scalia said that the Supreme Court has announced that all the usual rules of interpretation go out the window for Obamacare. The guiding principle of the court, Scalia said, is that the Affordable Care Act must be saved. Indeed, he said we should stop calling this the Affordable Care Act and start calling it SCOTUS Care. Because indeed, this has become a creation of SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States. Alas, Scalia was in dissent, and that would be his last opportunity to complain about Obamacare, at least publicly that we know of. The final case I'll talk about in my remaining few minutes involves the nuns, the little sisters of the poor. This is a group of nuns who run retirement homes throughout the country. Their mission is to accept all the elderly, regardless of their religion, regardless of what they can pay. And I mean, these are pretty good people. I had the good fortune of going to a lunch after the Little Sisters case was argued, and there were these nuns everywhere. I felt like I was in a casting call for The Sound of Music. You know, how do you solve a problem like Scalia? Indeed, but the nuns had a problem, right? They said, look, if our employees, by the way, the nuns aren't asking for birth control, but if their employees, nurses, janitors, whatever they have in their home, right? If their employees want to use birth control, they're like, we can't stop them. But the nun said, we don't want to be complicit in this sin, this doctrine of scandal, right? We don't want to be associated with provision of these drugs. Let them use a separate plan. Let them go to Obamacare, healthcare.gov to buy a contraceptive policy. The government said to the nuns, no. It is in no way burdening your religious liberty. In no way burdening your religious liberty to have this on your policy. Why? Because you're not paying for it. If you're not paying for it, it doesn't bother you. Nuns did not agree. So the case was argued. I was actually sworn into the Supreme Court bar that day. It was a pretty cool day for me. I was sitting 5 feet from the lectern table. And the justices seemed pretty divided.
It seemed like actually, it was 4-4. There were only 8 justices there because of Scalia's death. They seemed pretty close. After the case was argued, the nuns victoriously walked down the steps. They went to the microphone. I'm actually somewhere in the background. You can't quite see me, but I was walking down the steps at that moment. And the nuns were happy. And then something crazy happened. The Supreme Court, a couple days later, says, we'd like extra briefing. Huh? Basically, they said, we can't decide based on these facts what to do. We only have 8 people. So can you guys come up with some other way of giving these women birth control without burdening religion? Like, can you think of something else? And the parties wrote these briefs back saying basically, yeah, not really, right? Maybe there's some other way that the nuns can object, but the basic disagreement, are we using the same insurance plan or a separate insurance plan? That basic disagreement remained. So what did the Supreme Court do with this massive disagreement? They ignored it. They pretended it didn't exist. And a couple weeks later, they issued a decision. And in their decision, they said, well, the parties told us they can work something out. They didn't. But the parties told us they can work something out. Go figure it out, you guys. And they said, remand it back to the lower courts and come back when we have 9, which may not be for a while. So that was a partial victory for the nuns. They'll have none of it. But this case is far from over, which is probably why Justice Sotomayor rejected my book. Maybe she'll read it anyway. Who knows? The future of the ACA is far from certain. Indeed, Dean Gooder teased my 3rd book in the trilogy of Unprecedented, Unraveled, and indeed Undone. I don't know what the heck's going to happen. A lot of it depends what happens next Tuesday, and none of us know what the heck's going to happen next Tuesday. Really, none of us know. Yeah, none of us know. But the fate of the ACA is very much in trouble, as we're seeing with the beginning of this 4th open enrollment season. The simple fact is the law is unaffordable. Now, why is it so unaffordable? I'll give you guys a little economics lesson. The most popular provision of the ACA, the most popular part of the law, is a provision that says we cannot charge more money to people with pre-existing conditions. Doesn't that sound awesome? Isn't that so sympathetic and compassionate as a human being? It's freaking expensive. Covering sick people is very expensive, and that is in large part why Obamacare is spiraling out of control. Far more sick people are signing up than healthy people. It's inescapable. The mandate requiring people to sign up is only $600 a year. People are saying, screw it, I'm not going to pay that. So you have all these sick people and not enough healthy people, and these prices are going to keep going up and up. And as prices go up, guess what? Health people are saying, screw this, I'm not buying this product. It's going to be expensive with a high deductible, never see a penny of value from it. This is the very death spiral. The very death spiral ACA was designed to avoid. But due to the low penalty, it's not. Now, the government's predicting maybe the number of people insured rises to 13 million this year. It's about 10 million now. You know what the government's estimate was 5 years ago? 20 million people. They estimated 20 million people would sign up. We're barely at 10. And this year, forecasts are basically flat growth, maybe even a decline in the uninsured rate. Now, it's wonderful to say that maybe 10 million people have now been able to get insurance. Well, a lot of them had their policies canceled. The other number is 20 million people. This includes a lot of people on Medicaid who got free government insurance. I don't consider that much of a victory. But the fact of the matter is it's vastly underperforming, and the economics are fraught. Now, what do we do next? Hillary Clinton said we need a public option, right? Let the insurance companies compete with government and let a government policy be in the market. My friends, you don't compete with the government. They don't price based on profit. They price based on the U.S. Treasury, which is never ending. So once you include a public option, private insurance goes away. Now, rich people still have it, right? If you're wealthy, if you're, you'll still have your great insurance, but your average Joe down the street will not have it. But they say, well, let's repeal and replace the entire thing. Well, yeah, good luck with that, because you have 20 million people who rely on this law, and you cannot remove entitlements. So in this weird spot where the law is not working as is, and there's unlikely to be any agreement what to do about it. What does that mean for the future? Stay tuned to my 3rd book, which maybe another 3 years I'll be standing right here giving a talk on. Thank you so much for your attention, and I welcome any questions that you may have. Please clap. My best Jeb Bush impression. Questions? No question. The short answer is, can you repeal a statute? Of course you can. But how do you repeal a statute? You need to have a majority in both houses. But more than that, you need to defeat a filibuster. And so long as the Democrats have 40 members in the Senate, they will block any repeal of Obamacare. But more to the point, when you say repeal Obamacare, what does that actually mean? You have roughly 20 million people who now have gotten health insurance from it. They may not like it, they may be unhappy with it, but it's there. And as a matter of government policy, you can't remove entitlements. So you need to give at least the same level of care to others. So this was the gamble Obama made in 2009, once he said, let's pass this on a straight party line vote. Right? This was his gamble. And once people like it, we can't get rid of it. And he was right about that. So all these plans of repealing and replacing it are largely foolhardy. They're not going to go anywhere. Perhaps one of the few things that can be done is to give states more room to experiment and innovate and do things differently. In 2017, you have these things called innovation waivers that let states do things differently so long as it provides a similar level of care. Now, Hillary Clinton won't be too amenable to a free market approach, perhaps, who the hell knows. But in theory, at least, states can experiment more, and that might ameliorate some of the failings now. But we're largely stuck with this mess, and it doesn't end pretty. It does not end well. Yes, sir?
When you say entitlement can't be eliminated, what's the alternative? We turn them into oil?
Yes, or more like Sweden.
What happened? What are your predictions?
National health care. I don't say this with.
How does that happen?
I'm sorry?
Speaking of affordability, how does
Oh, it's gonna be awful.
how do we arrive there?
It's gonna be awful. Here's what's gonna happen, guys. Right? Here's what's gonna happen. Healthcare costs will keep going up and up and up and up. It'll be utterly unaffordable. Hillary Clinton or Michelle Obama or Chelsea Clinton, whatever president is, whatever point in the future, right? People chills perhaps. Will say we need a government option to compete. Once you have a government option, they start undercutting private insurers and they go out of business. So only the really rich can have insurance. And they'll say, well, we already have this public option, which millions of people on. Let's subsidize it more. And let's subsidize it more. Hell, why don't we just give it away for free? Right? Let's give Medicare for all. Okay, there we go. Maybe 15, 20 years. And my timeline might be off. I thought Obamacare would take about a decade to implode. It did in like 3 years. So maybe this timeline's vastly accelerated. But you're going to see people cannot afford insurance for this enrollment. It's too darn expensive. And then what? They go uninsured? So you're going to see movements to try and expand government's role in healthcare, not decrease it. Yes, in the back.
Without the alternative of the ACA, increase would have been a lot. So I know Kentucky has their state innovation. Anything else of any alternative?
So some states are doing better than others, without a doubt. In some states, insurance companies are actually making a profit. Why? It's surprisingly hard to pin down, and a lot of it's based on geographic regions and where people live. But the simple answer that I would usually give to this is states need more flexibility. And the way it works now is you have your gold, your silver, your platinum, you have these 4 or 5 plans. That is not enough for most people. So to the extent that the ACA that the federal government can relax some of these strict mandates, you may get some more people buying in a cheaper plan. The ACA was premised on the idea saying we don't want people having cheap plans. Let's get everyone, even the bronze plans, pretty substantive. They may improve the situation, but I'm not too optimistic. Maybe one more question. Yes, sir.
The backbone of Justice Roberts is on display. He's selected. What do you speculate is the reason why he's
the question is why does Chief Justice Roberts do his best pretzel impression to accommodate Obamacare? I think the Chief Justice, and I write about it at great length in the book, has a sense that he doesn't want the court to be at the center of these big political controversies. And for whatever reason, he's gotten this craw that ACA is untouchable, that it cannot be invalidated by any means. And as a result, he's really bent over backwards. He's read a penalty to be a tax. He said that the state means federal. I mean, he's done things that you you think he would not do otherwise. But he's really convinced himself that this is the right way of being a justice, being the Chief Justice. Maybe he thinks that if Obamacare is so awful, let's people repeal it. Don't depend on the courts to do so. But that's where we are, and the Chief's opinions have given me the chance to write 2 books and likely a 3rd soon. Any other questions? Thank you so much. And I'll be selling some books afterwards. If you want to waste $30, I'll be happy to sign it for you.